I have a question here for you. So you ready?
I am. Fire away. Yeah, please.
Okay. So Yvette has a question, and her question is, she says, we are currently going through a move to cloud initiative, so I would be interested in how to manage IT service management processes in the cloud. It's different from your traditional data center management.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a great question. And, maybe just to kind of take a little bit of a step back and talk about cloud computing in somewhat fundamental terms. So there was a great definition that was put out by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST. And within the NIST definition of cloud computing, they say there's basically 5 essential characteristics. Um, First of which is on-demand self-service. The next is this idea of broad or ubiquitous network access. The third is around this idea of resource pooling. The fourth is around this idea of rapid elasticity. And then the fifth is around this idea of measured service. And so when we talk, and so those are good fundamental concepts, those 5 essential characteristics of cloud computing. So what they mean for us when we talk about implications for IT service management, moving from on-prem to the cloud. Well, as we've alluded to, central to this idea of being able to move to the cloud is a self-service experience. And so it is about providing, whether it's a console or whether it's a portal. And so what has traditionally been more of a centralized, at times people-driven, and at times manual change management process, in some cases that massively changes. Because at this point in time, with cloud computing and with architecture like microservices and containers, we're able to have more decoupling within the environment. And so therefore change management can look very different. In some cases, change authority could reside within that team because they know that they can make changes to their services or to their microservices and not impact others. And then the other aspect of change management is, just as an example, there's this idea of being able to do auto scaling through cloud computing. Well, that's triggered by certain policies, and it's triggered by back-end automation. And so once again, those are changes that occur within the environment that we need to be able to track and have visibility of. But those are going to be pre-approved, standard changes, as ITIL calls them. And so those are going to move down that standard change path. And that doesn't mean that we don't track them. That doesn't mean we don't have visibility on the change history within an environment or within a system or application. We just have to approach it differently. So there are significant changes and considerations when you're moving from on-prem to the cloud. And part of that, not fully that, but part of that is that going back to the NIST definition, that on-demand self-service, that's a fundamental characteristic that needs to be accounted for when you evolve your service management processes for the cloud. So hopefully that helps.
It's Lisa again. I'm just going to jump in and say that when you and I were talking about the travel airline in particular analogy, and it really, really came home to me because we talk about self-service access. That it's so important to understand that you're giving the correct amount of access to the right level of person. And so that's why I love the travel analogy, but because through using Seat Guru and the other one that tells you where your flight is. So I'm getting on a flight out of Fort Lauderdale and it's coming in from Charlotte. I can see, has it left Charlotte? Is it going to land? So it's the information that allows me to make better decisions. But it's not like I can actually fly the plane. And when we sort of got there in our conversations, and probably most people on the call really understood that better than I did. But to me, that was just such an important analogy of, it's not, all it does is help the organization to provide the right data to the right people at the right time. And I just felt the need to sort of jump back in and say that because that really, like I said, it really struck home for me.
Yeah, and it's a great point, Lisa. And you can tie that back to developers. And so you've got, there's more and more of, as with DevOps, which is fantastic. It's this amazing cultural and professional movement that, among many other things, talks about being more collaborative. And it talks about breaking down silos and talks about more of end-to-end systems thinking. And so as these developers are being asked to remain more involved, later in the software lifecycle, a great example of that is giving them the easy ability to go in and be able to check and assess the health of their application services. So these might be services that they've developed, and these are services, maybe it's a Friday afternoon, and maybe they know that they've got big plans for Friday evening, and they know the last thing that they want to do is start, having their phone blow up, or their email blow up, or Slack channel blow up. And they might want to be able to proactively go in there and take a look at their services and look at the performance and the health and the behavior of of that developer services that are running in production. And so we want them to do that. We want them to be proactive, and we want them to have that end-to-end ownership, and we want them to stay close to the performance and the capability of how their services are running in production. And so we don't want them to have to enter a queue and request, hey, can you send me the reports from the real-time log streaming. We want to empower them on their own to be able to go and have visibility into their own services. And it's, Lisa's exactly right. It's I'm in Denver, and I catch a lot of, when I catch a flight out of Denver, sometimes the planes come from Houston, and especially this time of the year, whereas Houston's fared better than Florida for sure. But I want to be able to go into my mobile app, and I want to be able to see, hey, I'm catching a flight to Chicago, and I can go into my mobile app and I can see, for my flight, I can see where that plane is originating from. And if it's in September, and if there's tropical thunderstorms that are heading straight towards Houston, and then the plane that I will board is coming in from Houston, that gives me kind of that visibility, and it gives me that opportunity to be proactive. And I might have to recognize my flight could get bumped. I might want to call the folks that I'm going to be meeting with in Chicago and say, hey, chances are really good that I'm going to be late. So as a road warrior, for folks, and I'm sure a lot of the folks on this call have done a lot of business travel, it's nice to have that level of visibility, that level of granularity in terms of, oh yeah, I'm cutting it close. My flight gets into Chicago O'Hare at 2 o'clock, and we have our meeting at 4 o'clock, because I'm trying to spend as much time as possible, at home with the family. So I'm cutting it close. Well, I want and need that visibility to be able to keep my teammates abreast of my situation in Chicago. So I'm glad you brought that up, Lisa. It's nice to be able to kind of think about this in terms of travel, which I think we're all familiar with. And then now we're all being stretched to better understand the implications for software development.
Right. And in the real world today, when there is something, there's a weather condition that's really affecting several airports, it's actually faster to go into your phone to get the answers than it is to stand in the line of angry people. And they're angry because they don't have information. They're all the things that you showed in the beginning. They're frustrated. They're unhappy customers. And so having the, faster, better information that allows you to make decisions, it's a great analogy, Nick. Well done, you.
Well, just thank you, Lisa. Just one last take on empathy. So you as a traveler, can you imagine, for years now, you've been going in and you've been able to book your own travel. You go into the website, you go into the app, you book your own travel. Can you imagine if you had to pick up the phone as a business traveler, or just a traveler in general? Can you imagine if you had to pick up the phone and you had to enter a queue and wait to be able to talk to an agent, and then you started to speak with that agent, and they started to give you the 5 different flight options between Denver and Boston, and you're furiously writing down all these notes. Oh, wait, what was that departure time? What's that return time? I mean, that's a highly manual, highly frustrating process to have to engage in that manner. Well, that's no different. That's no different than you having to call and speak with an agent and do this real time and do it manually and scribble down all these notes on all the different flight options. Can you say the first option again? It's no different than when we're engaging and we're supporting software developers, whether it's they want to have access to they want an environment, or they want to get visibility into log analytics to help resolve test defects, or they want to be able to have that visibility into their production services. Once again, if they had to either go into a system and create a ticket and then wait for someone to get back to them while they waited in the queue, or if they had to call someone and kind of wait to be able to get that information kind of, by voice, kind of this manual back and forth exchange process, just as it would be so frustrating for you as a traveler, it's equally frustrating for developers when all they want to do is they want to go fast because they're under a lot of pressure from the business to be able to turn this feature functionality around so they can take that to market, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll pause, but I appreciate your prompts, Lisa. Excellent points.
Well, and I think it was a brilliant analogy too, because I think it really simplified it for me. And I haven't been in the conversations that you and Lisa have had, but it really drove home the points that you were making. So I agree with Lisa. It was brilliant to do it that way.
Oh, thanks, Karen.
Nick, I have a question from Mosin, and I think we answered it. And Lisa, if you could just go back, I think just one slide to that. Is that the summary page? One back? Nope, one more back. Yep, there you go, that one. So, and just raise it up a little bit because I just want to look at that graphic in the bottom right. So Mosin was saying when you were looking at the what is modern self-service access, on that slide, he said each one of autonomy, feedback, and visibility replaces which steps of the standard IO processes. And I think this is where you answer that question. But in case anybody, if you wasn't clear on that, I just wanted to bring that to your attention, and if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, so when we talk about modern self-service access, we've kind of couched it in terms of autonomy, feedback, and visibility. But when we talk about autonomy, it's about oftentimes being able to provision something or to be able to go in and make modifications to that. And so, historically, going and making a change to an existing environment is the kind of thing that would invoke an element of the change management process, more and more of the change management process as you get closer to production. But nonetheless, it's this idea of, I'll go back to the cloud computing example that we talked about. So, one of the characteristics of cloud computing is this idea of rapid elasticity. So, what that basically says is capabilities can be elastically provisioned and released, in some cases automatically, to scale rapidly outward and inward in line with demand. So to the consumer, the capability available for provisioning often appear to be unlimited. And so, but this idea of rapid elasticity says, well, I want more capacity. Well, there's the chance to have auto scaling where you can put certain triggers in place that say when we hit this level of capacity utilization, then we need to burst to additional capacity. And this is something that could occur in a prod environment or in a dev test or prod environment. So it's recognizing that changes are occurring today more than ever before in an automated, pre-approved fashion that look different than our standard changes of the past. And so again, that doesn't mean we don't manage them. We do manage them. We have the visibility on them. We're able to go back and look at the history of changes around a system or application over the last week or month. So it's a good question, and I want to do the best job I can in answering it, because it's a little bit of this is it's a little bit of a paradigm shift for us. It's a paradigm shift because there's a couple different things that have changed for us. Number one, work that used to be done manually can now in some cases be done in an automated fashion. Number two, based upon evolving architectures, where we might have had a very tightly coupled monolith architecture in the past, in some cases today where we have more of a loosely coupled microservices architecture, then that takes the change authority down to that level of that team that owns and has responsibility for that service or for that microservice. And they know that they have autonomy as a team because they know they can make changes and not negatively impact other teams by virtue of their changes, by virtue of this architecture. So it's a paradigm shift in terms of automation. It's a paradigm shift in terms of architecture. You know, it's a paradigm shift in terms of culture. It is this idea of breaking down these silos, and as we break down the silos, we're also breaking down, you know, possibly some of these central processes. Well, it's not breaking down the central processes because you're going to have some systems, you know, whether it's a legacy system where you still need to have those traditional change management capabilities. It's just understanding the ability to evolve that based upon the needs of and the requirements around the particular system and the architecture and the developer. So I'll pause here because I don't want to take all of our time, and hopefully that's got a little bit closer to the answer, to addressing the question that was posed.
Thank you, Nick. And Mohsen, if you have something else you need clarified, just put that in the questions for us. Oh, he said thanks. Okay,
oh, great.
So good. All right.
Great.
Okay, thank you. All right, that's all the questions that I have for today. So unless anybody has one last minute question you want to chat in, I just want to remind everybody once again that our next webinar is scheduled for Thursday, November 15th, when Sean Mack, CEO of XOps, joins us with his presentation titled Innovate Idle with DevOps. And we'll send you an invitation for the next webinar and look forward to having you join us. And as you, oh, yes, Mohsen wants to know, is there more information that they can study?
Absolutely. So kind of a good start point is that we talked about that self-assessment that people can request. That's a good start point. And then we kind of pull in additional information together that we can make available through that same channel.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And as you log out, please just take a minute to complete the post-webinar survey. This survey gives you the opportunity to request any webinar topics that you'd like to see presented in the future. And your feedback is really important to us, and we do use that information to bring you additional presentations that are topic specific for you. And it's also part of our continual service improvement process. So appreciate you all joining us today. And Nick, so appreciate you joining us today. It was a great presentation. You get lots of kudos and thank you and great information. So thank you again so much for doing that for us today.
You're very welcome, Karen and Lisa, and thanks so much for having me.